komunitinya terbentuk.
Di perumahan PPR, hanya terdapat satu jenis rumah yang disediakan kepada setiap isi rumah, iaitu unit 3 bilik dengan saiz dalam sekitar 700 kaki persegi. Ini adalah mengikut piawaian reka bentuk masa dahulu. Namun, reka bentuk ini tidak memenuhi piawaian semasa, iaitu Standard Perumahan Kebangsaan 2019 yang mengesyorkan saiz minimum 800 kaki persegi untuk unit 3 bilik. Tambahan pula, semua isi rumah PPR menerima unit 3 bilik yang sama, tidak kira sama ada keluarga besar atau kecil. Ini menyebabkan terdapat unit PPR menjadi sesak, manakala ada pula yang tidak digunakan sepenuhnya. Selain itu, kami mendapati bahawa kerja penyelenggaraan berjadual tetap tidak dilaksanakan di PPR. Hasil sesi libat urus kami dengan Persatuan Penduduk, didapati bahawa kebanyakan kerja penyelenggaraan hanya dijalankan apabila terdapat laporan kerosakan seperti lift tidak berfungsi. Pemeriksaan bangunan profesional atau pemantauan keadaan fizikal PPR juga tidak dilaksanakan. Kami turut mendapati bahawa tiada penyelarasan insentif antara mereka yang membina, iaitu Kerajaan Persekutuan, dengan entiti yang menyelenggara bangunan PPR, iaitu Kerajaan Negeri. Jika kos modal, iaitu pembiayaan untuk membina bangunan itu adalah rendah disebabkan oleh bahan dan reka bentuk yang tidak berkualiti, maka kos penyelenggaraan akan biasanya lebih tinggi. Insentif kewangan ini boleh diselaraskan dengan lebih baik dengan pendekatan kos kitaran hayat atau life cycle costing. Pendekatan ini menganggar kos yang diperlukan untuk bangunan sepanjang kitaran hayatnya, dari pembinaan hingga perobohan, termasuk kos penyelenggaraan jangka panjang.
Ada juga isu berkaitan pemilikan atau
Okay. Hello everyone. The forum will begin shortly. But you are allowed to bring our light refreshments prepared, like coffee, to the hall. Thank you. Hello everyone. In case you need an internet or Wi-Fi connection, you may log into Marriott Guest and no Wi-Fi or no password is needed. Sorry, it's called Marriott Bonvoy for Wi-Fi connection. Also, we will start at 10:15, and if you like to have some breakfast, you can bring the breakfast plates inside the hall, and there's also takeaway cups to bring your coffee inside. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. The forum will commence shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. The forum will commence shortly. To ensure the smooth flow of today's event, we kindly remind everyone to switch off your mobile phones or put them in the silent mode. In the unlikely event of an emergency, please remain calm and proceed to the designated exits located at your left. Good morning and a very warm welcome to Khazanah Research Institute's Housing Forum 2025 with the theme Humanising Housing Between State, Markets and Communities. My name is Tiba Lakshmi Kunasekaran and it's my pleasure to be your MC for this forum. Before we begin the discussion, allow me to provide a brief introduction to KRI. Khazanah Research Institute is a policy-based think tank that carries out research on the pressing issues of the nation. We are a non-for-profit organization that is incorporated in 2014 and is funded by Khazanah National Berhad and Yayasan Khazanah. Since then, KRI has published a number of reports on multiple areas ranging from housing, social protection, digitalization, labor market policies, and more recently on climate. Coming back to our Humanising Housing Forum, across Malaysia, the question of housing has become increasingly urgent. Urban renewal often reshapes skylines, but not always lives. Rental markets remain precarious, and housing standards, particularly for the vulnerable groups, are lacking. So, in this KRI Housing Forum 2025, we will explore what it truly means to humanize housing in the face of these challenges. How can the state, markets, and society work together to make housing not just affordable, but equitable, adequate, and decent? We are privileged to have with us today a distinguished panel of national and international experts who will be sharing their insights on this important topic. Let's welcome to the stage. Firstly, we have Dr. Suraya Ismail, who will be moderating the panel session. Dr. Suraya Ismail is a Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute. She is a council member for the National Cost of Living Council, the National Cost of Digital Economy and 4IR, and is a panel of experts member for the KPKT. She sits on the advisory board of the Saucy Hawk Southeast Asia Centre at London School of Economics and has been a visiting scholar at the Centre of Housing and Planning, University of Cambridge. She has authored numerous policy reports and academic publications and collaborated with organizations like Asian Coalition for Housing Rights and UN Habitat. Her research interests include the history of economic growth, housing, cities and regional development, theory of the firm, and institutional economics. Round of applause for Dr. Suraya Ismail. Next, we have in our panel Professor Dr. Town Planner Mariana Mohamed Osman is a professor at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning and currently serves as the Dean of Kulliyyah of Architecture and Environmental Design at International Islamic University, Malaya. She has been a chartered town planner with the Royal Town Planning Institute since 2001 and a corporate member of the Board of Town Planners. Professor Mariana's professional and academic career spans over 28 years with planning experience in both Malaysia and the UK. She has led and contributed to many national projects funded by the ministries, agencies, and statutory bodies, including studies on Malaysian housing policies like National Housing Policy Review, Socio-Economic Study, Rural Resilience, and legislative frameworks like Housing Development Act and Residential Tenancy Act. Her research covers housing policy, urban development, community planning, tourism planning, facilities management, and social impact assessment. Thank you, Prof. Mariana, for joining us today. Next, we also have international experts who will be in our panel today. Ms. Somsook Boonyabancha is the Secretary General of the Asian Coalition for Housing Rights, a coalition of organizations working on urban poor housing development in Asia. She was previously the Director of Community Organizations Development Institute, CODI, in Thailand. She has been working extensively on urban poor housing development and slum upgrading in Thailand and other Asian countries for the past 30 years. Ms. Somsook's expertise lies in promoting community-driven and community-led development to improve urban community housing, community welfare, and rural community land and housing development. Round of applause for Ms. Somsook Boonyabancha for joining us today. And lastly, we have Professor Dr. Gemma Burgess, is the Director of Cambridge Centre for Housing and Planning Research in the Department of Land Economy at University of Cambridge. She leads a multidisciplinary team on policy-oriented research projects. Her work spans land supply and housing delivery through the planning system, housing and digital innovation, and housing options for an aging population. Professor Burgess also serves as Vice Master of St. Edmund's College, Cambridge, where she is the Dean of Discipline, Steward, and Director of Studies in Land Economy. Thank you, Prof. Dr. Gemma Burgess, for joining us today. And now we will welcome all our panelists to join us on the stage. To the audience, throughout this session, if you have any questions for our panelists, please submit them via Slido using the QR code displayed on the screen. We are also pleased to share that this forum is being live streamed on YouTube, and the full recording will be made available on Khazanah Research Institute's YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I pass the floor to Dr. Suraya. Over to you, Doc.
Yes, thank you, Tiba. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction of myself and the panelists. I'd like to start by saying thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. If I may speak in Malay first. Thank you, terima kasih kerana sudi datang kepada ahli-ahli top civil servants di dalam this room dan juga mereka yang parti-parti yang relevan dalam pembangunan perumahan di Malaysia. Saya nampak ramai rakan-rakan di sini dan saya sangat suka hati kerana yang datang bukan saja dari komuniti, daripada kerajaan state, tetapi juga mereka yang membuat perumahan. Jadi saya nampak ada arkitek, ada developers. Thank you, because I think we can only make this work if all of us understand the issues and all of us come together to find a solution. Jadi itulah hasrat forum ini. This is the first discussion of many, and we hope, as you know, we will have more processes, more forums like this that would have a good discussion on the problems that we have, and to understand the root causes of those problems, and then to see who in this equation can help the most. So without further ado, saya akan bagi sedikit mukadimah lagi, and I'll speak in English. And to all our viewers virtually, welcome. And please ask questions. Kan kita ada Slido and whatnot. So do give your views as well. Okay, so this conversation didn't start from orang kata halfway dari awal. It's already quite mature. The things that we've seen inside our budget last year, inside the policies, DRN 2.0, and now currently the government is crafting DRN 3.0. So we have seen some slight progress in improving housing affordability, but there are many challenges remain for the housing sector. For example, the commodification of housing and the policy decisions that support this conceptualization of housing increasingly disconnect housing from its core social purpose of providing people with a place to live with security and dignity. So kita tidak lagi mahu rumah sebagai transaction saja, but how do we humanize housing? So that hence we want to provide people with a place to live with security and dignity. So I will give 4 challenges as a preamble to this discussion, and then I'll ask my expert panel to give their input in 4 rounds. Hopefully we can finish that 4 rounds, and after that we'll open it to Q&A. In that Q&A, you are more than welcome to trash all of them, not me, in terms of what they are saying. But we would like to make this free and easy, because it's always good that we are open and you know, speak truthfully about things. I hope. So the first challenge of housing. Housing affordability has marginally improved over the years, but houses remain expensive for many households. The real estate market has benefited from the affordability threshold put in place by the government, but it does so by delivering low quality products. The transactional nature of homes have been prioritized rather than maintaining the quality of livable standards. For example, houses are deemed affordable at RM 250,000, but with a gross floor area of about 380 square feet. That's an abuse of the quota. Furthermore, the price cap for the affordable housing segment, which is currently set at RM 300,000, does not truly reflect the ability of households to pay for housing based on different state condition. With this threshold, it is only in Selangor and Kuala Lumpur, but it was universal to all other states. Second problem or challenges, the existing housing delivery system has led to high housing overhang and a persistent incident in abandoned housing. The high number of overhang units and high vacancy rates highlight the incessant mismatch between housing demand and supply, driven by weak feasibility studies and inadequate planning, not only by developers, but also by local authorities, PBTs, who approve these developments. The persistent incidence of abandoned housing is also a direct consequence of Malaysia's existing housing delivery system, the sell then build system. Urban renewal has recently been proposed as a solution to address the long-standing issue of abandoned projects and housing vacancy or overhang, but it may not be effective. That's my personal input. If not implemented carefully, urban renewal risks creating another similar vicious cycle, producing high-density vertical housing under the same problematic sell then build system without addressing the root causes why as sell then build is a little bit inadequate. Thirdly, now I'm going to the banking system. Linear microprudential measures and government demand-side assistance programs may have intervention errors. Macroprudential regulations are generally lenient and complemented by various government interventions on the demand side. However, this does not guarantee housing affordability. In fact, some measures can exacerbate the issue due to existing market inefficiencies such as overhang and unsold units. It's a real conundrum. Why we have overhang and we don't have prices going down. 2, loan repayment criteria typically consider only the housing price as a commitment while overlooking associated costs such as maintenance fees and taxes, which may affect the borrower's real financial capacity to serve the mortgage. 3, despite a significant proportion of renters in urban areas, in KL it's about 50%, nearly, housing policies and assistance programs remain heavily ownership-centric. The misalignment, risk-exclusionary outcomes may lead to policy and programmatic errors, though it also presents an opportunity for recalibration. For example, during the pandemic, mortgage loan repayment moratorium was given, but not for those renters. There were no specific government program for renters, and we had to rely on the goodwill of the landlords for leniency. Last but not least, there is a growing disconnect between the statutory role of local plans and the actual planning approvals granted by PBT. The ongoing approval of new housing development in areas already experiencing high vacancy rates without reference to housing demand data or urban service readiness, which is a local infrastructure, has created a series of systemic and multifaceted implications for Malaysia's urban development landscape. This pattern reflects a supply-driven development model that is largely detached from actual demographic needs and market absorption capacity. This disconnect, evident across various localities, is not merely a technical or administrative oversight, because it carries far-reaching consequences for land use efficiency, housing market stability, planning governance, and public confidence, trust in government institutions. With those problems, let me bring you to our wonderful panelists for today. So we aim to have this discourse on the provision of housing based on housing rights, humanizing housing. So in coming up, so this conversation must not just go about affordability, but about the whole ecosystem. So in coming out with practical solutions or policy options for some of the challenges mentioned above and beyond, our discussion will explore the role of government, the private sector, and society at large, or communities, in order to make this work. So, first round of question. My first question to all our panelists is the same question to all three, but it goes to Professor Burgess first. So the question is, there are advocates for both market and state-based solution for housing problems in most societies. This tension shapes both the debates and how housing problems are attended and resolved. In some cases, these debates are informed by an awareness of the kind of social and political values which underwrite the public discourse. In others, such concerns are less relevant, and the major issues circulate around purely financial and economic imperatives. In your experience, are there examples of long-term success in dealing with housing problems through deep government involvement? Or are there examples where the private market, I've got my friends from Radar here, and the other ecosystem, the architects, the civil engineers, where private market initiatives work? Over to you, Professor Burgess.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you for welcoming me to Malaysia. So it's a very good question. I think that most housing systems in the world embody some kind of tension between market provision and state intervention. In the UK, more broadly in Europe, we can see examples of both where state-led and market-led initiatives have achieved success, but also examples where there are significant limitations of both. On the state side, one of the clearest historical successes has been the post-Second World War expansion of council housing in Britain. This was large-scale public investment that delivered millions of homes. It raised standards, it reduced overcrowding, and it provided secure housing for low and middle-income households. And for several decades, this program played a key role in improving social outcomes and underpinned economic stability. However, the long-term challenge was financial sustainability. Reductions in public funding and the sale of stock through the right to buy policy from the 1980s onwards left a diminished public sector. And today this now contributes to our shortage of affordable housing. But on the market side, there have been periods when it's private development supported by planning reform and financial incentives that has played a major role in housing delivery. So in England during the 1990s and the 2000s, we've seen private house builders expanding output significantly, often in partnership with housing associations, using planning obligations through what we call Section 106 agreements to secure affordable housing as part of larger housing developments. And this harnessed market energy to deliver the social goal of affordable housing. But this model is highly cyclical. So when the financial crisis hit in 2008, private housing supply collapsed, and so did the collapse of affordable housing delivery. So I think the lesson is that neither market provision nor pure state provision has been sustainable in the UK by itself. What we see is better success long-term to a partnership model. I think housing associations in the UK are a great example of this, where the state provides the framework, land use planning, subsidy, regulation of standards, and social housing investment. But the market delivers innovation, it delivers scale and responsiveness to consumer demand. I think the UK's experience shows us the over-reliance on either one side or the other. If the state retreats too much, it leaves an affordability problem. If we over-centralise state provision, we face fiscal and political limitations. So I think housing is too important to be left just to the market, but it's too big for the state to deliver by itself. So I think a long-term sustainable housing system is a partnership between the two.
Thank you, Prof. Gemma. Thank you for that. If I may get Prof. Mariana to give a flavour of what's happening here.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Okay, talking about examples, a success example that we have in Malaysia, I think there are a lot of program policy that has been implemented by the government that can be considered as a success. I think first of all, we look at our public housing program, PPR, for example. It was introduced in 1980s for the purpose of overcoming issue of illegal squatters, for example, in urban area. So these, I think, program starting in 1980s, we have more than 200 projects supplying more than 100,000 units of PPR. Of course, in terms of the rate itself, we are having like 124 ringgit per month rental rate. Quality during the early stage, we can consider a good quality because of the movement of the resident from illegal squatters to a proper housing area. Of course, during the early stage, they have landed property, and then later on to be in a strata development. I think second policy in Malaysia, we have also Dasar Perumahan Negara or the National Housing Policy, where identify that provision of housing need to be affordable, need to be in a good quality, and also assisted with the private sector delivery system. That will be on second. Third one, we also have affordable housing policy, where implementation we have at the national level, but the implementation basically based on the state level. Currently, for example, we have individual state having affordable housing policy. For example, we have Rumah Selangorku in Selangor, we have Prima Pahang in Pahang, for example, Rumah Mampu Milik in Johor, where the housing itself are being sold within 42,000 to 300,000, and this delivery system are being implemented by the private sector. Then in terms of the success of private sector, of course, we have large-scale development. For example, in Bukit Jelutong, in Subang Jaya, for example, in Desa Park City, where developers are building variety type of houses with a different type of ranges in terms of prices, with good quality infrastructure. So that can be considered as a success. But of course, we can understand issue with regard to affordability, overhang unit, especially at the higher end of market, still prevail in Malaysia. We can see even in terms of the low affordable housing range are also at overhang situation. So there will be issue with regard to, I think, mismatch of market between supply and demand, especially in terms of location. So this need to be addressed by the whole housing development system, either together, working together with the government, the private sector, and even the community.
Thank you, Prof. Mariana. If I might get Somsook's input on this. Government, private sector, or community?
Okay, actually, I work for the government. I work for the people sector, not the private sector, but I also know, and we work together. I think to answer Suraya's question in one sentence, I think that the housing development will be balanced if the power of making decision and making all the elements regarding how the housing development is supposed to be for which group, how to carry on the ongoing process of different elements have been equally participated by all the parties. And this is the key question, how the power is sort of put together in sharing the different needs. Here in Malaysia, we could see that the power is more one-sided, right? Sorry, this is to comment the aspect that we have to further develop, right? It's a very good thing compared to many Asia countries here in Malaysia, where the development of housing come from the private sector and could deliver in a good scale compared to public sector alone. Limited because you have a lot of subsidy. Yeah, I mentioned that later. Here, you finance the housing development through the private sector since the movement in the 80s and also the second movement of this redevelopment, which is quite interesting. However, because this power is not so balanced, you see the decision of the development model come from one-sided. The people who make plan, who decide the details, and the people have a little miserable negotiation process of how to stay, how the maintenance supposed to be. They're not in the process of designing or bringing their way of living from the past to continue to the present. So this is the major problem. The power equation is not equal, and that is the major serious problem. Anyway, I think that in the two kinds of housing that I have visited, actually 3 kinds. The first is the kind of social housing, where the government provide a lot of subsidy, which is very, very generous, very kind government, give a lot of subsidy. People pay a little bit, but they live individually. So this is the one set that people are living like a very passive resident, right? Where the government would take care of all the maintenance and doing everything. I think that, in my opinion, working with the community people for all my life, we have not captured the strength and the ability of the people sufficiently. We treat people a little more like children. Yeah. The other model, when you work in the redevelopment model, it's more like people are not the part. The planning comes first, and then you're supposed to comply with the design and the rule of the developer, which is not necessary. Why? The profit going too much to one side and determined by the one side that actor, right? So people, if we just listen, I just ask, why don't we discuss? Why allowing the people to also share how they like to live, how to plan that, and also the big margin, the financial margin from the new development to set aside, to deal with the maintenance, to deal with the social development, to deal with the children program, to deal with the economic generation. So you have a lot of fund that allow new development possibility to grow. So housing become a new development of inclusion, of new opportunity to change the different kinds of status into a better possibility. In Thailand, in fact, we divide too clearly. The private sector, let them do whatever, sell whatever. There's the kind of government regulation, no cross-subsidy as such. Here you have done a lot of good cross-subsidy in terms of finance. The government do their own kind of public housing, and it's not very active. It's because it's a lot of subsidy and maintenance by the government. So we developed the third alternative, which is the people-driven housing development, in such a way that housing is to be implemented by community people. We make a citywide survey, link them in with the city to see the needs and demand, and we link with the architect from the university to see what should be the alternative plan for each of the site, and the government provides subsidy. But the subsidy have a certain ceiling, and you give them in bulk. So the community own the project. Community develop whatever form of housing, whatever form of social development, economic development, and it's a part of the city development. And it worked very well, very cheap. The housing production from this process is about, I think, one third of the market, if the market price. Because people, when they work as a group, they will negotiate on land, on infrastructure, on building material, on how to do it cheaply, because they don't have a lot of money, and how the different group of people, renter, the small family, the big family, the business family, how they would put together the plan, and it become more organic, it become more lively this way. So we sort of change the former private sector only, that is a market driven. The government, which is too much a public arrangement with a little static kind of provision to the resident, into the people-driven. The people-driven go with the city, go with the surrounding, with the neighborhood and so on. I show some of the picture later on, yeah, but this is just for introduction.
Thank you, Somsook. So that's interesting. So the Bangkok way is to put resources straight into people, communities, no intermediary of developer. I like also Professor Burgess said that sometimes it's being put in the housing association. So before I go for my next round, which I should start with Professor Burgess as well, but could you, before you answer this question, could you then explain that third way, which is the housing association? Who are they? What do they do? What is their function? And after that, if you could answer the second question, this round 2, that was round 1. As mentioned in the first question, in terms of social values, Somsook might have answered this already, but you can continue. Social values, can we have an effective discussion about housing by ignoring those more fundamental concerns about how and what kind of societies we need to build? So yes, over to you, Gemma.
Thank you. So housing associations are not-for-profit organisations. They can be very large, increasingly they are. They're not community organisations. They're professionally run, professionally managed organisations. After the Second World War, when we built large-scale council housing, it was managed by local authorities. But the cost, maintenance, management of large-scale housing estates by local authorities who have no professional expertise is very difficult. And over time, what we've seen is the outsourcing of housing, affordable housing, into housing associations. Some of these are huge. I work a lot with a housing association called Places for People. They employ 10,000 people. They look after 250,000 units. Many of these now also are private developers. They also build market housing, but they use the market housing to cross-subsidize the delivery of social housing, so social rent and affordable rent, and they also manage properties. So they sit in between the private and market and the government, but they are independent, not-for-profits. But they also build. Many of them now build. They manage stock and they also build. So they're something that's sat in between. About a third of all new development now goes to housing associations and becomes affordable housing. So it's a significant part of the market. On your question about social values, I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to have a meaningful discussion about housing without touching on deeper questions about the kind of society that we want. Because you can't separate housing policy from wider political, social and political values. Because housing is not just a commodity. It's a foundation for health, for education, for family life, and for social cohesion. And we know that housing is not just a physical structure. It's not just a financial asset for value accumulation. It's a core part of social citizenship, about that relationship with the state, but it's also a key determinant of life chances. So, for example, we know that one of the core determinants of health is the quality of housing. One of the biggest costs to our National Health Service in the UK, our biggest cost, is poor quality housing. But different areas of housing policy reflect different social values. So after the Second World War, I referred earlier to the large-scale building of council housing. But this was underpinned by a strong collective belief at the time that housing was a right of citizenship and a strong belief in collective welfare and social reconstruction. And that drove that large-scale public investment in council housing. The policy was not just about supply, it was about creating healthier communities that were more equitable. But then in contrast, that shift from the 1980s onwards is around home ownership, it's around the sale of public housing stock, and that reflected a very different political philosophy. This is about a preference for individual responsibility, individual property ownership, and using housing as a vehicle for asset accumulation. And this has delivered significant benefits for some parts of the population, but it's also widened both generational and regional inequalities. So values really matter. If we treat housing as a purely economic good, then policy has to be about supply, demand, and finance. If we see housing as a social right or as part of building inclusive communities, then we have to ask questions about tenure mix. We have to ask questions about affordability, sustainability, well-being of residents. And then questions of justice, fairness, and inclusion become integral to urban and housing policy. It doesn't mean ignoring economic realities. Housing development has to be financially viable, otherwise we build nothing. But effective housing policy can't ignore that normative question about what kind of society do we want to build. And at the point when you're thinking about your new housing policy, that's the important question. Because behind every housing system are assumptions around fairness, responsibility, and the kind of society that we want to live in. So the economic instruments, so the planning system, the financial subsidy, financial regulation, have to operate, they do operate within a framework of social values. And if we want to produce outcomes that are both effective and legitimate, then we have to take account of those longer term questions about the kind of society that we want, or in this case, you want to build.
Thank you, Gemma. Mariana, your take on this?
Okay, talking about social value, of course, we know that housing, a collective housing create neighborhood. And neighborhood, we create community and society. I think what is important is that either the government or the developer and also the community, society as a whole, will need to understand what do we need in future. Talking about housing per se, talking about the economic of housing, of course, we know that it is very important that for the developer, for example, to make it profitable. But what is important is the quality of housing that we are producing, quality neighborhood that we are producing. In terms of our social value is very important. We are looking at decent type of quality housing that can improve our quality of life. I think in terms of the role of the society, input, for example, what Somsook are saying is correct. At the moment, working together with community is quite lacking in Malaysia housing scenario. A lot of our housing development are purely to the private-centered development rather than working together with community, looking at what do our community needs. So I think in terms of value is very important as a whole. And later on, we need also to work on, I think, for example, now we are doing a revision of Dasar Perumahan Negara. So looking at, for 10 years, for example, not just physically looking at the quantity, but also the quality. I think a lot of issue within our housing scenario is talking about affordability, talking about the quality of housing itself, and what type of quality of life that we are producing through our new housing market itself. Okay, in terms of, there are basically essential questions that we need to think. First is talking about whether we are building houses in location that allow people to access jobs and also service. Second, I think talking about homes that are affordable. One, talking about ownership, but whether it is also affordable to maintain. So this is also very important. And the third one is talking about how basically our housing policy are able to strengthen our community cohesion and also reinforce or reduce segregation. I think that value is very important. Hopefully with the theme of humanizing housing later on, that will be part of the revised, for example, Dasar Perumahan Negara, we can have this element of social value more into our housing development.
Thank you. I'm going to Somsook now with the same question, but I'm going to throw in something a bit, hopefully not too difficult, because you've done this for 30 years. So when you say about community building, and therefore I suppose the collective, the social ties at the community level must be strong. But what if hypothetically, what if our cities now, because we drive our housing units now for individuality, finance is individual, current status now, why would we want to have a collective? Why should that be a social value to you, Somsook? Sorry.
Well, I think we lost the opportunity in making the housing project a kind of individual arrangement. Yeah? So if you look at what Professor German said, we are building the city of individual through the housing development, huh? Because the arrangement is too individual and no connection between each family to the other. Everybody just the recipient of a housing project and live separately, right? Although you stay there together for 10 years, 20 years, it's not just going to a concert in which you meet somebody just for 3 hours. Here, you're going to live together. One building, one block of housing is one village. Huh? No social structure, no active participation, no living system to be built. No? You lost the opportunity of building the strong roots of the city by the people, right? And because we think about housing production, housing delivery as a physical, product alone, we haven't thought sufficiently on the soul of the body. You know, we only think about the body. We forget the soul, which is the system of people living together, and it's supposed to be a system that support each family, the system that allow the linkage and the community that become an immune for the outside danger and the protection. We need to have a welfare among ourselves. We need to be able to make our children become a good people in the society, a giving, a loving, a good citizen, a healthy citizen. So housing development should try to provide that kind of environment for every single person to be a good citizen of the city. Not only that aspect, but the aspect in which we work together as a group. We can be an active citizen, a good participation to take care of the park, to take care of this and that, and to tell the city what it would be good to work with the community or the people in general, the consumer side and so on. It's such a huge new possibility that we could make it possible through the housing development. And the housing development is such a powerful intervention of inclusion, of providing the welfare, providing the system of integration of social linkages between the people. I think we need to think about this aspect much more than just producing unit, how much it costs, and very physical, very material, materialistic housing development, which is happening. We have to think about people who live together and what would be the quality of people, what could be the system between the people and the city, and so on. This is a deeper aspect of what housing should provide and should be a process of change, a process of inclusion, a process of rebuilding the scatteredness of our people in the city. It shouldn't be a system where you start with eviction. Huh? If you are a renter, you're out. If you cannot pay, you're out. Huh? But it should be a process of embracing everybody and create a different space so they exist. They exist, they are part of the whole, right? So if it's in this way, it means we look at people and the community as the key target. And then how to make finance possible. The finance that should not be too much a burden to the public finance, and how the different parties, the government, the city government, the private sector could work together on that. Yeah, I think we should make a clear focus on people, and the other element how to serve that, not the other element as the key focus, building and profit and people after. Then you finish. You undermine the system of people that has been rooted for a long time. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Interesting. So we go for round 3. So what kind of perspective can one adopt in dealing with the problems of housing with different contexts which requires different approaches? Basically, my question is, to what degree is a policy prescription that seems to work in one specific context? It's good that Somsook said just now about the context in Bangkok, but can it be used as a guide or a template for another? I mean, we have our own example in Malaysia. We borrowed the idea of TOD in Hong Kong. But mind you, the developer in Hong Kong that time, we did a case study, Dr. Farisa did that, where basically the reason why it was successful, TOD in Hong Kong, was because the developer was given the right to develop the MRT as well as develop the land. So it itself made it feasible. But over here, it was public money, but privatized gain. So I'm not going to say more to that, but different places made it possible because there was a clear alignment of what one party should do and how one party should contribute back by having those profits. So hence, these countries have different institutional contexts and policy levers that made it successful in their respective countries. Is there a danger that the search for quote-unquote best practice invites more problems than solutions? I think I want to give this to, yes, Gemma, Professor Burgess, yes.
Thank you. It's a good question because lots of people come, for example, to the UK, to England, to learn from what we do, and yet we consider that we have an affordability and a housing crisis. So, I mean, I think what comparative housing research shows is that policy transfer is very complex, often problematic. You know, we have a policy transfer problem, that a policy that looks successful in one place can get adopted somewhere else, but without sufficient attention to the institutional context. So, you know, housing is not a sort of plug and play model. Housing systems are deeply embedded in wider institutional and cultural contexts. They depend on land markets, governance structures, financial systems, and even social norms about tenure and the nature of family life, and they are different in different places. I mean, Singapore is often held up as an example of great delivery of affordable housing for all. It's been remarkably successful, delivering high quality and affordable housing, but it relies on a very particular set of conditions: strong state control of land, centralized governance, and a long-term political commitment to public housing. If we take away that institutional foundation, then that model is very unlikely to deliver the same outcome somewhere else. The UK experience offers lessons here too. I've talked about the mechanism of Section 106, which is using planning obligations to secure affordable housing from private developers. Nationally, overall, it's been very successful. But it works in a context where land values are very high, where planning authority is relatively strong. But in places without that land market dynamic, or without that planning capacity in the planning system, the model is much less effective. So planning obligations have secured significant amounts of affordable housing from private developers in high demand areas where land values are very high, London and the southeast of England. But the same approach is much less effective in the weaker housing markets where land values are low or where planning capacity is low. So even within one national system, context determines whether something is a viable policy tool. So I think that policy learning across borders is valuable. It's good to learn from each other. It's good to learn what doesn't work. But I think that successful adaptation requires understanding those underlying principles. You know, what is it that integrates transport and housing? What is it around long-term affordability in that context that's important? And then designing mechanisms that align with local governance and local land and finance system. So I think ideas can travel, but they need to be translated carefully into local institutional frameworks, local economic realities, and local cultural expectations.
Thank you, Gemma, very clear. Mariana, anything?
Yeah. Okay, talking about housing. Okay. highly contextual dependency, looking at the policy, the structure of the government, for example. Best practices is very good for us to learn, of course, but fully 100% implementation would be quite a problem if, for example, our governance system is different, our socio-economic demographic is different, our income distribution is different, so our local authority structure is different. So in adapting for best practices, we need to learn, we need to adapt, and we need to modify based on what are available at the local context. One, for example, we can see, for example, the example that Dr. Suraya giving, TOD. TOD is very successful, for example, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and also in Japan, for example, very densely populated and with high connectivity. In terms of TOD, I think our government, we already have a guidelines on TOD produced by Plan Malaysia. Each individual state have actually guidelines on TOD as well. We cannot say that TOD is not successful if it's being implemented in Malaysia. We need to understand that. It needs to be modified, for example. In terms of concept of TOD, usually there will be 5 elements that is very important. We're talking about density, we're talking about diversity of land use, we are talking about even design, we are talking about distance, walking distance between, for example, the center itself, and mostly TOD are based on station, center. I mean, rail center, we have MRT, LRT, commuters, for example. Another one is talking about destination accessibility. So looking at that 5 variable, I think in Malaysia itself, we can see, for example, our LRT station. KLCC may be quite a good TOD station, or for example, for a TOD development. Certain area, maybe area Pasar Seni, maybe area KL Central, but it won't be quite, we can consider as successful if it's being implemented at Seri Rampai, Wangsa Maju, Setia Wangsa, for example. So it needs to be looked at in the context of location. I think that is very important. Not to say outright it cannot be implemented, not to say outright it can be implemented. It needs to be modified based on our local context. Second example that Dr. Suraya was saying in terms of HDB or Housing Development Board, social housing in Singapore. In terms of history, Singapore are fully, for example, 100% land previously upon their independence are government owned. We try to follow what they are proposing, I mean what they are implementing, using, for example, our PPR. At the early stage, the purpose itself, at the objective of PPR at the early stage is talking about eradicating issue of slum, illegal squatters. So in achieving that objective, it is success. But of course, there are issues in terms of implementation. Talking about maintenance, even for example, going to DBKL, issue talking about collecting of rental rates. People are willing to pay for Astro 120 ringgit, 80 ringgit, but unable or unwilling to pay 124 ringgit for their rent. For example, talking about maintenance. I think Somsook is saying is correct as well. How basically the community need to work together. Because at the moment, going to Bangkok previously, looking at their example of collective housing is very, very a learning curve, because we do not have this collective housing of cooperative housing, for example. Working from the bottom, going up, means that the community are working together. Same thing, for example, we do not have housing association. Maybe in future we will have that. Our market mostly are on the private sector. So these are the things that maybe we need to learn, and maybe we need to adapt and shift, for example. I think risk of copy best practices is that it can also mismatch with the social reality. So it is good Most of our study usually looking at best practices, but we cannot take in comparison apple to apple. So it need to be looked at in relation to certain component. So yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Mariana. It's quite interesting that along the same line, one works, one doesn't. So yes, very interesting. Yes, Somsook.
Yes. Well, I better touch on the Thai system. The Thai system trying to make use of the more flexible finance as a way to move things, even the private sector, not the government public system. But in our Cody model, we make finance flexible. We don't have any power about land acquisition, whatever. We only have one funding and also the subsidy from the government, and do it in such a way that it allow the flexibility and make it easy for the community to develop. But by being in such a easier process for the community, it allow community the confident and also the active actor. And by being active actor, you could link the community into a network, negotiate for whatever land possible in the city, where are vacant land, and try to see who owns the land. Either it's a government land or it's a private land, and can we negotiate for this land? So the community themselves become the active actor on land acquisition. And by doing that, they link as a network, so the city authority care for them because it's such a visible, good number of water linked together. Yeah, in this way they could propose this and that and join the many other things that the municipality develop as a policy directly about housing or other social development activity. What I'm trying to explain is that by make a more flexible finance in which people can handle, it allow people become an active demand side, right? So by being active demand side, you gain stronger negotiation power. As a big group and on any particular project, by being a stronger demand side or community side, it sort of allow the people the space to sit together with the city authority, sit with the landlord, either government or private. Yeah, and when they agree, after negotiation, in 10 pieces of land, you may get 1 or 2 or 3. You go ahead with the project. We are ready to finance those projects. People would organize as a cooperative. We have more than 500 community cooperative operating. We need to use cooperative because it allows people the legal entity to be a collective group, acquire the land, build a house, and build a system, whatever social system right after. So it becomes the kind of active development process for more sustainable development. So this is how the system is working, by allowing the people the space, the stronger negotiation power to get the land, because as government organization, whatever government organization, it's not so easy to get land from the other organization, right? Here in Malaysia, you are much easier compared to other countries in Asia, I know, because it's a lot of public land, yeah. Only public land has been given to the private developer. Instead of making a little more balanced system in which the people, the developer and the government can agree on what would be the right kind of development direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Somsook. That's interesting. So if I look at this, the word a stronger demand side, that means, well, I'm an economist, and I always say that price would coordinate, or price would ration between demand and supply. Somsook is saying? create a stronger demand by giving that power of negotiation to people. And then that demand is people-based demand. It's a whole flip of how we think. Oh, I like someone saying yes, good. Okay, but more debates later, okay? But I just want everybody to understand that we are looking into really different fundamental ways of thinking. Professor Burgess gave Housing Association, the value system that underwrites it, the types of policy levers we have, understand the institutional context, what works for a society then might not work for a society now, temporal as well as the nature of the state. Last question, round 4, before we open the rounds to everybody else. Prof. Gemma Burgess, we know localized problems requires local solutions, but state-led policy initiatives often has to be universalizable. Am I saying it right? Universalizable. Yeah, you can't go. Yes, sorry. What are the challenges faced in trying to find a balance between what appears to be conflicting demands? This is not just a matter of specific policy to specific problem, but it's inherent in the structure of the state, the contemporary state. I'm glad people from the state are here today. So I won't say anything, Professor Burgess.
Thank you. So that tension, I think, between universalism and local responsiveness is a long-standing dilemma of all welfare and housing states. The modern state is structurally required to govern at multiple scales simultaneously, so delivering nationally coherent frameworks while accommodating local diversity. And in housing, that tension is acute. So universal standards, so for example, we have, in England, we have a decent home standard. It's a national requirement across the whole country. We're about to get a national requirement for minimum energy standards. These universal standards provide minimum guarantees of safety and habitability. But the drivers of housing problems, from affordability to urban growth pressures, are profoundly uneven across space. England is profoundly uneven across its geography. But national policy has to balance equity and efficiency, treating citizens fairly while responding to very distinctive local contexts. And local housing problems are extremely context-specific. Affordability is very different in London than in a rural village in the north of England. And solutions need to be responsive to those local circumstances and realities. But on the other hand, national governments need coherence, consistency, fairness. So they need to distribute resources in ways that are politically legitimate across the whole population. If anybody has been following UK news, it's not very long since we had national riots. This is, deeply held political issues that come to the fore when we're talking about the distribution of resources. It often means that government want universal frameworks, national housing standards, national subsidy programs, national housing targets. And in the UK, that difficulty is acute. So central government sets ambitious housing supply targets and affordability policies and imposes them top down. But delivery requires on local planning authorities whose capacity and land markets vary enormously. The national government wants more homes everywhere, but local governments worry about lack of infrastructure, they worry about land availability, and they really worry politically about local community acceptance. And that's a very acute tension. So that structural challenge is inherent. The state has to combine central authority with local responsiveness, and balancing demands requires careful institutional design, and I don't think that we have that right. So strong national policy is important for minimum standards, so ensuring housing is safe, that it's affordable, that it's sustainable, and then particularly, in the UK, we're facing big challenges around climate change, and it's requiring national standards of sustainability to try and tackle that. But flexibility must be built in so that local authorities can adapt that delivery to their own circumstances. And I think that successful systems are those that recognize that housing is a shared responsibility across different scales of governance. It's a shared responsibility across national, regional, and local. It's not a top-down, one-size-fits-all model.
Thank you, Gemma. I like the fact that there's a minimum standards at the federal level, and maybe when it goes down to the PBT, there's flexibility. I mean, it can't. How does, interestingly, in Malaysia, how does one report that when the central is demanding something? Interesting conundrum. Yes, Prof. Mariana.
Yeah, thank you. I think balancing local needs with the national policy is a bit difficult. Of course, we do have several national policy. We have national housing policy. We have urbanization policy. We also have even, for example, standard construction industry standard for CIS under CIDB produced on housing. What are the minimum standard for construction in housing, for example? We also have these policy at the national level are being implemented at local level and also at the state level. When we look at, for example, our national housing policy, Dasar Perumahan Negara, each state have their own policy in relation to housing. For example, Selangor, we already have a policy in relation to their affordable housing. I think Johor, all states have their own policy in relation to housing policy. We have also such a plan, for example, a sector on housing infrastructure, for example, and all the, for example, the state structure plan are being used and referred to in our local plan. So to say that in terms of course, we know that one policy fit all does not can be considered a success when we are implementing on the ground. But based on our federal system, state have the power even to implement and not to implement. For example, our 172 Act, Town and Country Planning Act, it is also based on the concurrent list. It also have the power of the state have the power to implement in terms of the section, for example. For example, implementation of social impact assessment. Kelantan is not making it compulsory. Johor is not making it compulsory. So we can say that the power to implement is also at the state level and also at the local level. Of course, looking at what we can say, the capacity of each state and also at the local authority state, it varies. What can be a success, for example, in Kuala Lumpur may not be able to be implemented in, for example, Alustar. We can see that in terms of housing prices, affordable housing, Malacca are having, like, for example, 280,000 ringgit of ranges of affordable housing as compared to what the national is saying for 300,000, for example. They are having, a certain state are having like 180,000 for their majority of their affordable housing. So it have a range of implementation methods. I think in terms of local variance, we have to look at in terms of land value, in terms of income disparity between even district. One state even, for example, cannot, we give an example of Selangor. What is in Kuala Selangor may not be able to be the same prices, cannot be in PJ, for example. So it needs to be looked at a very local context. To say that one policy to fit all may be a bit difficult. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, Somsook.
Okay, I just agree with both the speaker that there's a need for flexibility, especially at the local level, yeah, and that's so important. Actually, my former presentation content is trying to touch this point. I haven't gone up to this point because I think if the state and the upper development agent have a lot of say, then we would put a lot of regulation because we couldn't get the voice of the resident into a process. To me, I think that in the changing society, maybe we need to make all the development a little more and more flexible. And here in Malaysia, it has a much better institutional arrangement than Thailand and many other countries, because you have the state. And the state is quite, strong. They have land, and if they have a good finance, they can go ahead with the housing development. While in many countries in Asia now become more and more centralized. And that is a very dangerous way of making institutional development to be flexible, right? I think here you have a lot of chance. And by having a flexibility, it means perhaps we have to move more into working on the finance, instead of making regulation that it has to be 60 square meter, it has to be, the subsidy need to be like this, and also the regulation on the ground, the stiffness of this regulation, if we allow the actor on the ground to work together and allow the finance to make it possible for whatever agreement between the local body, the developer and the community agree with each other. We make it like that. And it goes very well, very easily. We do not care much the regulation, the local authority do. But many of the Ban Man Khong program in Thailand is a little substandard because the poor cannot pay. But if the local authority agree with that, and it's much better than the former slum house, so what's the problem? So local authority agree and give them the house number, the legislation properly. I think in the changing society, perhaps we may have to look into how to build the tools and mechanisms that allow more flexibility for the different actors to work together, right? Instead of we work on the system of rigid legislation, regulation, standard, this and that. And you need a lot of the government people to check whether it follow that or not. And this stiffness may not relevant to even the developer or even the community. Allow more sensible and flexibility and using finance to allow this power of making agreement between the actor on the ground to be possible. Just want to show a quick slide of our model, just 2-3 minutes. Next, please. So when we work, we start by making a map of the city. We say citywide. So all the area, here you have it also, you make the circle in the redevelopment area, but somebody make the circle. Here, when we make the map, everybody, the community, the city, and all the others see it together. And then we start bringing them into a discussion, how to develop and how to get the land and so on. Next, please. And get the community people themselves do a survey. Survey your community, survey the other people community, and come into an information. It's to activate them to be an active actor. Next week. Funding, we support funding. We support funding. We support, if the local government can support. If they can support, we find the money to allow them to do all this activity. And this is planning, architect plan with the community for each community, each location. Either you already get land or you use this plan to do the negotiation with the landlord. But start the planning, to include everybody so they see the future. They don't believe that they will live like before. You need to change. City need to change, people need to change. So change is through the planning process where people would sit and understand how they want to plan their life. Next, please. And then saving is a must. because housing development require a lot of investment. So everybody have to be a part of the saving. By including yourself into a housing development, you have to start saving as a group. Community fund. Next, please. And in our case, still a lot of slum. You already finished all the slum. But the form of change is not a problem. It could be reblocking, it could be a land sharing, it could be a redevelopment, reconstruction in the middle. You can change anything. It doesn't matter if they agree and everybody get a better right. And there is the co-op, the community organization to manage all the things, and we pass the budget to them, right? Next, please. And this is the canal development. You see the left-hand side, the former slum. You change them all this day, more than 10,000 units. Different construction. Next, please. This is a redevelopment project where the former slum allow this lake have changed into this building. So the former building either is 2 floor, 5 floor, 10 floor, doesn't matter, as long as the people involved in the planning and also they are the subject of the change. Next. It could be high rise. This is on government land. Next, please. Or the whole city. This whole city, the city authority and the people acquire all possible land, private and public land, and then they start the housing development at the city scale, and then they move into welfare and many other. Next page. So you use the housing development to start many other social development, linking the elderly group into a lot of activity, the children network, the income generation, and many other. Next, please. I think we finished. Okay.
Thank you. On that note, we will open the Q&A. Yes, over to you. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Suraya and the panelists. We had a very insightful session, and many key takeaways and reflections that we carry out from this discussion, especially on how we should not view housing as just a commodity, but rather how it plays an important part in building the society that we want to create. So to the audience, both here in the hall and also those joining us online, a quick reminder that you may continue to submit your questions via Slido, and we will now begin the Q&A session. Over to you, Dr. Suraya.
Wow, interesting. Very interesting questions. Oh, they can see too. So, first questions first. How can our housing policy address racial segregation, especially in terms of rentals, land planning, and developer diversity? Who wants to take that? I can take that too. I can start? Yeah. Gemma. Gemma, you ready? Yes, go on.
I don't have an answer. I mean, in the UK, we have tried to tackle this in part through legislation. So it is technically illegal to discriminate, for example, around rental provision based around race or ethnicity. However, research shows that we still have a lot of racial discrimination, particularly in our private rental market. So legislation is only one part of it. Developer diversity, we have very little. What we see in the UK is the history of immigration played out through the housing market. If you've been following our news, what we have at the moment is huge debates around immigration, because we've had a lot of very recent migration of asylum seekers and refugees. And that's where we see a lot of tension arising, because housing, we have an affordability crisis. Housing is in shortage. We see that played out. So I don't have solutions. We have legislation, but part of this has to be addressed, I think, through housing that's inclusive, housing that has good supply, and housing that is affordable. Because as soon as you have an affordability problem, you put in something like migration, like we have in the UK, and it leads to huge political tension.
That is universality also could be addressed here, because we don't have legislation for this. So again, it's underwritten by our social collective values. If this is something that we want, we can put legislation into non-discrimination in terms of rental, and of course, developer diversity. Okay, second one. How can universities reframe housing and cities as a human right and train future professionals to design with equity and dignity? You are the Dean of the Kulliyyah of Architecture and Town Planning. It has to be you. Maybe
Okay.
after that, Gemma, because you're also.
Okay. 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 Thank you. Okay. Talking about subjects being taught within the university, we have actually guidelines. For example, working together with the professional, the lembaga, okay, the board itself. Curriculum structure usually will look at individual profession, but in terms of the element of social, in the curriculum structure, usually it will be include element of social community planning, for example, element talking about equal opportunity, element talking about even subject on sustainable development are to be incorporated into the subject. Of course, we understand even under the Ministry of Higher Education, okay, element of sustainable development need to be incorporated into the syllabus or into the subjects. I think another thing is talking about how basically we train our students. We go to the ground, for example, even in urban planning, we have studios. We identify, for example, projects, redevelopment project, for example, one site for special area plan where the student will go to the site, work together with the community, identify the issues and problem, so that we can come up with some suggestion or plan that incorporate what their needs. Talking about equity and dignity, of course, this is very important. I think in terms of whether in architecture, whether in urban planning, element of equal opportunity, element about design, various type of design, looking at, for example, needs of community needs, elderly, the young, women, disabled, and disadvantaged group are incorporated, I think, in the syllabus.
Before I go to Gemma, I'd like to expand this question, because when I went to one of the projects in Bangkok, I visited a lot and I learned a lot from Somsook since 2015, sorry. Oh, 2010, sorry. And what I saw over there is that at the project level, we see a lot of architects from University of Bangkok, from Thammasat, great universities over there, young architects being involved in the social sector, not-for-profit sector, and designing with the community. Now, how on earth did you get, these really great architects who sometimes in our country or other Asian countries tend to go to the private sector because, you're an architect, you don't want to earn some money. But in Thailand, it appears that the best architects help the community. How on earth did you do that?
Well, we still have a big number of architects go to the commercial sector. That's no problem about that. But I think the key point is to make a very big space. So university can also join the development, actual design of how the development is supposed to be. Good for the community, good for the university. Because otherwise university will have international curriculum, but not learning from your own society, right? So you have to make your own society a living lab, a living lab. We have a lot of that. It become a lot of practice in many universities, and the government also support that. The KRI itself also create a very big space. We have funding. If the university is interested to make a special workshop for students, for the professor, to go into wherever the people need, we provide you the budget, right? To make it easy for them, to make the space wide open. And the community love the student, community love university to be involved with them, because this is more neutral actor. yeah. And by having university has a very strong voice
Yes.
to the government,
Yes.
to the larger society. You know, you need allies. So this is the way that you bring the ally into the area of the community planning. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very interesting because that kind of create some sort of the learning that also could be brought into the university curriculum, as you mentioned. I think Professor Burgess, Cambridge has a interesting key worker type of development, and as well as I think how do you foster this in your graduate students and your undergraduates? Thank you.
I think we do a good job of teaching our students this, and I think that actually our private developers, they want to design with equity and dignity. They want to build good communities. They want to build to high sustainability standards. Our challenge is long-term and structural. The way our land value system works means that land values are high. Everything is a race to the bottom. So every developer is competing for land, and therefore standards come down, sustainability standards come down. So actually, I think we do a good job of teaching this. I think we're constrained by the values of our land market. Our university is a good example because we decided one day that we would build our own town. I don't know why we thought this was a good idea. We're very good at education and teaching. As a house builder, we're slightly less successful. I'm going to take the team to look at it. But we have built our own urban extension as key worker housing for postgraduates, for postdocs. So you can come and see for yourself whether you think it's a success. It's a success in the sense of its very high standards of sustainability, architecturally designed. The infrastructure went in first. It has an outstanding school. But a private developer could never have built it because it was unbelievably expensive. It's only because the university is going to own it for the next 800 years that we were able to build it. A housing developer couldn't have done it.
Interesting. Yes, yes. Okay. Oi. Okay, yeah. Okay. Before they go to give you a mic, I'll go this first. Then okay. And then someone could maybe give her a mic. Is your thing in the slide though? Oh, sorry. Okay, wait, hold on. In overhang 22. Okay. In overhang quarter 2 2025, residential properties below 300K make up 36.1% of the total. What are your thoughts on the gap between this and housing affordability? This is interesting. Actually, we have some data on this. Though it makes the highest in terms of overhang, but it was also the highest in terms of selling it. So when you have a lot of units being sold at that market or sector, the fact that it had even also high 36.1% is also interesting. But the reverse, 100% minus 36.1%, so 72, is it? 74% is in the higher range. So if you look at it that way, this is the more interesting thing, which is about 70% of these properties overhang are in the above 300,000. So I think that's important to realize. Next, commodifying housing generates revenue for state governments and profit for banks and developers, which flows back to GLICs. How can we make change possible? I don't think we are against profit, but we are against extreme profiteering because that's it. But yes, continue. Anybody would like to take this?
I think the government, of course, trying to make a little more active demand side. But what is important in this equation is that government have to play more role. Yeah, government need to be a balancing mechanism between the different party in the process, the developer, the community, and whatever possible, school and this and that. I think I think it's the role of the government. I feel government would have to be more like a referee in a football match. A referee for every party, yeah. Not one party, otherwise the other would lose, yeah. Okay.
Housing does generate revenue for state governments, for banks and developers, but I don't think we should also ignore the role that home ownership plays, because in the UK, everybody that's a homeowner also benefits and makes profit out of this. We love talking about house price increases in the UK, because housing is an asset. It becomes our pensions directly through the asset that we own. You know, we love to see how much our house has increased in value, and indirectly because significant chunks of our pensions are invested in house building companies. So I think individual, I won't say speculation, but asset accumulation also plays a role in this. And from what I've learned about Malaysia this week, you're also quite a speculative bunch of homeowners. You know, you like to invest in property. And so I think we also have an individual role in this too.
I think you can give an example of UK, because I think for Malaysia, we are not really being taxed if, for example, we are buying second or third houses as compared to UK, for example. Even in terms of people who are eligible of loans, we are qualified to get 90%, for example, for 2 houses, while the remaining is like 80 or 70%. And there is no tax being imposed, for example, for second or third house. While I think in UK, they are imposing more tax. Yeah. So that can be a deterrence if, for example, the government would want to get more revenue. Second, not to say to control, but to ensure that housing are not being built too much. For example, issue talking about overhang, even 300,000, we consider it as affordable, but it still have 36% of overhang. So a lot of it talking about issue of financing. Maybe the low income M40, B40 would want to buy, but they are unable to secure loans. Location, mismatch of location. A lot of the location may be too suburb with low connectivity in terms of public transport. So that can also be a factor. So I think we can also learn from the UK in order to reduce speculation, for example.
Yes, I think commodifying housing, as our esteemed panelists mentioned, it's not just it's not something that only the market does. Society does it too. So we kind of create the problem sometimes as well. So maybe yes, we can put some tax to those who buy a lot. But also, I think it's quite interesting because the cottage industry is also is needed, because if we have secured tenancy in rental, then there must be a landlord that backs the renter. So that means some people will have to have 1 or 2 houses so that they can rent it out. So this is the great thing about policy. We do need to balance the power between renter and landlord, but there would be some units that will be owned by 1 or 2. What we don't want is speculative buyers who buys it not to become a professional landlord, but wants to flip it, and therefore the rental would be to cover their mortgage, and it's going to be excessive rental. If you have a professional landlord, or someone like, maybe if you want, Prof. Mariana, you can, if you want, or maybe someone that thinks that I can maintain a house, I can give good rates for my renter, and therefore I can be in that space. Because as we go along, there will be people who be renting, say, for 10 years. Then after that, they will then buy a house. So that is a gap that we have in our housing market. Yes, I've asked Adriana to put it on a paper. Then I can read it out loud. So someone from my team can come. Oh, you WhatsApp me already. Didn't bring my phone. Nazan, please. Okay. Next, how should we balance housing as a social good with housing as an economic driver? Terima kasih, Nazan. Dan Kanan. And what is the ideal mix to ensure both equity and growth? Anybody?
I don't know. I think economic driver you can do with very many other things. Housing can contribute to that. We make an assessment to the housing project that the community build. We have this SROI. What is it called? SROI, the social development, social economic development impact, and it found. You have the increasing value of 6-7 times than the original investment. So in itself, it makes the economic stimulation anyway, right? But we should not make the housing development too much an economic growth driver or something like that, which is the case here in KL, right? Sorry, on the point that housing is a social good, a social right, a social inclusion, or the social good point, it's so important, and it should be the prime consideration. But at the same time, we could make we could aware of the factor that this also make an economic growth. It could be an economic driver,
Yes.
but economic driver should not be the prime consideration.
I think this is very important because what is the role of the government? They try to protect the most vulnerable. So that becomes, in its approach, a social approach. But when it comes to those who are strong enough, households that are strong enough, then it is a house that you don't have to help to too much. However, when we say economic driver, I think I totally agree with Somsook. This is a base for you to have. This is a base, a home is a base for you to drive your economic wealth. Meaning you work there, you are productive in your house, if the standard is decent, you talk to your neighbors, you have social capital, that in and of itself is an economic driver. So we shouldn't look at it as just this is the thing, like commodity, but it is something which can be used for both, for economic driver, for social good, but not in the limited sense of economic driver, if I understand this question right. But I think I'd like to continue with the answer before, Gemma, if you want to add to that. How did Thailand? So this is the question which I think is related. How did Thailand address? How did Thailand address no funds? If you have no funds to subsidize, and how did you change the political mindset to more for pure commercial to social benefit? Because I think that's the same question more or less to you. I mean, what changed? Because I know you were in government before, and then you changed, you went into the third space.
Well, the Thai government is not highly stable. You can always find a way to negotiate, right? Yeah. The negotiation is a little better in Thailand than here. Here you're becoming more and more weaker, so you have more room now. That's one thing, and because we're working very much with the demand side, and the MP have to listen to the demand of the people. So if we make it right and constructive, there are room to do that. I think that to set up the demand of the people who are in need of development. One is to shout that, we are poor, huh? We need this, we need that. No, we should have the right in order to get something. But I think for the housing development is more than that. We want this kind of housing so that the people will have better opportunity, we have better community, we have a better system, and we could be an active part of the city, you know. If we put the demand in a proactive manner, in which the politician cannot deny too easily, yeah, and it helps the development of the city and the other as a whole, yeah, and there are no other way to address it. That could be a possible way to also educate, the understanding of the power section, to see the needs of the people and how this group of people could contribute to the process of building a better city as a whole. I think we have to frame our demand in a constructive manner. But there are groups who just battle. That's another thing. I don't know whether I answered that.
Yes, you did. You did. Yes, you did. Any thoughts on this, or we go to the next question? Low income people can't buy those, I suppose, cheap houses. High income people avoid cheap houses. What are your thoughts on this? Could this be seen as part of the middle income trap? But we're talking about low income and high income. Okay, but could this be seen as a part of middle income trap? Does anybody understand the question?
I believe that the question is asking about the gap in terms of the delivery, in terms of ranges of 300,000 to, for example, up to 400 or 450,000, where the M40 are able to buy. Because we know that the B40 or the affordable housing have the requirement. They have to have certain income for them to be eligible to buy the property itself. Of course, now at the moment we're talking about low income people who are applying to buy the affordable housing. They are unable to buy because of the loan issue, for example, while the middle income, because of the gap between the delivery of the 300 to, I think, 450,000 is still a gap there. So it can be seen as a trap to the M40 group, I think, because the developer tend to build the higher range while leaving the gap of the M40 range of the 300
this
to
the squeeze middle group type.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody wants to elaborate on that?
I think another thing is talking about the market, or the developer need also to able to build houses at this range, because they are actually market. People who are basically 40% of the population are within that range. So it is very important. Of course, we know that the local authority, the state authority, can have indirectly some certain imposition on these ranges of prices, but it needs to be negotiated together with the developer as well. I think that would be my take on it. Yeah.
This is very interesting conundrum, I think, because as we all know, we here use the 3 times median income, right? So basically, as you rightly mentioned, Prof, Kuala Selangor's housing market is different from KL market. And in order for us to understand the distribution of income between district, and then how to make sure that the supply at district level is as what it is, this is sometimes not being done by price. That's why we see the mismatch. But it must be done by proper targeting on what could be built at that district following the income of that people. However, this can't be done because we don't have data on this. We don't have origin destination types of data to then look at where is the housing market, where do you go for living, where do you go for school, where do you go for work, and therefore how do you then target properly where things ought to be. And this is very interesting because if you follow the income distribution and you have the pricing for each house, following that 3 times the income distribution, this might not be a problem after we have proper data.
Yeah.
So I think one of the solution or tool would be to have more data on housing market, more data on the types of products. I don't want to say products as commodity, homes or shelter we can provide,
Yeah.
and the ecosystem of the neighborhood. Okay.
I just want to add another thing. We are talking about the whole supply, not just a new housing. We have existing supply as well. I mean, secondary market, which is also available. I think even within that range of less than 300,000. Not just talking about the whole new supply coming in. So I mean, we involve the university involved with a few studies. For example, doing RT. I think a few of my colleagues are also consultant doing rancangan tempatan RT. A certain, for example, area, district are having a large number of supply as compared to the population. So this need to be acknowledged. And I think the local authority, the state authority need also to acknowledge that they are oversupply sometimes housing in comparison to the population themselves. I think one of the question talking about, for example, if the housing is already sufficient, do the local authority need to approve further planning permission? I think the issue with regard to, for example, our rancangan tempatan, our RT is that we zone our area, okay, kata orange. Totally we know it's talking about housing. Developer coming in, submitting planning permission, and the local authority did not, I think, look at the total, not to say did not look at, but they have to take into account when they are approving the planning permission, what are the condition of the existing supply. So that they can plan that, because we know rancangan tempatan or our local plan has period until up to 2030, for example. So these are the population, these should be the numbers. While when they are zoning the area, they are talking about the suitability or the availability of land for example, for that type of development, for example, housing. They are not talking about planning, looking at up to 2030, for example, we need 30,000 units. But they are looking, okay, this land is suitable for housing. So they will zone it as residential. So these are the things that I think local authority, state authority need to look at in detail when they are even approving planning permission. Of course, we need to recognize that the effort in following the zoning of the area is there. Now currently, I think all local authority need to do a checking. If, for example, submission is not following the zoning of the area, outright they will reject the planning application. But talking about units, for example, whether they already have overhang unit within the district, this sometimes is not being taken into consideration when they are approving planning permission. So I think that is concern.
Just like to add a little, I think that for housing professional like us, to make housing development possible for all is the real challenge. No matter how poor you are, and use the housing development process to change or to offer the new status to the people who have weaker status or even the ethnic problems and whatever, to make a change. Housing development is an intervention to make the poor, the unaffordable have the status. So how the challenge would be designed in such a way that it's offer this change and make it possible. Not that we start with affordability. If you are not fit with my level, my price, my design, you out. No, we can develop housing with such a concept. Housing development should try to include everybody, but we know that there are different income, there are a weaker group of people. How we address that? There are disparity in the process. How we address disparity in a positive manner. I think that in terms of thinking along this line could be possible. Now, if we don't do it that way, and then we build the unit for the richer people or for the higher income group, which is the case, and then you have a lot of vacant unit, right? In Thailand, they have a problem because the developer need to get the money, and then no buyer for such a high price. So they open more and more quota for the foreigner, right, to buy it, which is a lot of problem. You don't know, and the foreigner who have money and want to have a unit in your country, some are okay, but many are very much in doubt. Who are you? And we have a lot of these gray criminal, who have the right to stay in this condominium and so on. No? It's very, very difficult. Suddenly you open the permanent stay for many of the unclear set of people, which is so big at the international level this day. Yeah. That is another danger, because we build too much for them, not for our people, and then we have a problem. Then we invite them to our country. Otherwise, the developer have a problem. Yeah. So this is what happened.
I do look at the time, and we just have another 5 minutes. I think local government election is not something that we are equipped to answer. So as the moderator, I think I would like to skip that question. And then what can be done by housing land? Okay, maybe I can go to should so-called affordable housing. What's this? No, I wanted to go for the last one, latest question. Is it good to move to sell housing stock in Malaysia so government can transfer the maintenance costs to the poor? But can the poor would be able to maintain? This one I want to give to Gemma. Do you want to try?
We did this a long time ago. So we had a right to buy policy. People could buy their council houses at a massive discount. And what's happened there is there have been winners and losers. So if you bought a council house in Cambridge, you now own an asset that's worth a lot of money. So a council house that you maybe bought 20, 30 years ago in Cambridge, now worth almost £1 million. Lots of council houses worth a lot of money. If you live in the north of England, where house prices have not increased so much, you maybe are asset rich, you own a house, but you've struggled with maintenance. So what we've seen on council estates where some properties were kept as rentals, still owned by a housing association, and some are owned by individuals as homeowners, is over time we've seen a depreciation in the quality and the ability to maintain some of those properties. Now what we're seeing is that housing associations who own a lot of stock in an area are also having to do work on the houses that are owned by individual homeowners. So it's very much dependent on what happens to the value of those assets over time, what's happened to the economic prospects in that area. In a place like Cambridge, where people now earn quite a lot, they're able to maintain those properties. In other parts of the country, maintenance has been a problem. So I think you might find here, if you sell off your properties to cheap price in KL, where land values are high, property values might increase a lot over time. In the beginning, people might not be able to maintain them, but they'll eventually end up with an expensive asset. In other places, that might be more of a problem. Maintenance is clearly a challenge here.
Thank you, Gemma. I was told by our organizer, because there's so many questions, they're giving us another 15 minutes. But I've already skipped that question, right? Local elections, so we'll continue. So because they're saying there's a lot of questions, especially virtually. So I think we'll give another 15 minutes if the panel is fine. Yeah, okay. What can be done about housing agencies and landlords limiting home ownership by purchasing large numbers of properties and renting them? I think this is quite a phenomenon in the US and UK. So everywhere, okay. Maybe Gemma as well? Not yet, yes, for Gemma.
It is an issue in the UK, but we have a growing private rental sector. Lots of people either can't afford to buy or they want to rent. Young professionals, come to places like Cambridge and they want to rent. So somebody has to provide rental property. What we've seen over the last 5 maybe years is the government have been trying to professionalise the private rented sector. So they've been trying to push landlords towards becoming companies, towards guaranteeing renters' rights. But this has taken many years. Our private renters bill came into force like last week. This will mean that eviction suddenly is not possible. And it means that lots of landlords want to sell their properties because it's an asset and they want to hang on to them. So I think there's a mix in this question. Lots of people do want to rent. Somebody has to provide that rental property. And so you can try to professionalize your sector. If you want to stop people buying properties in large scale and renting them out, then you tax them. So we've reduced tax subsidy for rental property, and that's encouraged some landlords to professionalize and become proper professional letting agents. But somebody has to provide rental property if you have demand for renting.
Okay. Next. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to add. Talking about rental market, of course, in Malaysia we do not have a rental tenancy act currently. There is an effort by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to draft the act itself. Of course, involved in the drafting of the act together with the ministry, there are a lots of during our regulatory impact assessment process, there were a lot of objection by the public. I think one of the element was objection is during at the early stage, the government was thinking of not to say holding, but managing the deposit of the tenant, but it was totally not accepted by the public. They would want, the public willing that the money to be held by the landlord. Okay, that was, during the RIA process. I think looking at, for example, practices in Australia, they have rental tenancy agency. Like macam kita punya KWSP, they hold the punya deposit, and upon, for example, any issue with regard to dispute between landlord and tenant, they will assist. So the process was really good. Maybe our issue is talking about our public have a bit low trust to the government. So that is one of the issue. I think, but the process itself, I've been looking at it in Australia, it is really good, effective. I think the agency is very self-sustained. They are not using the government money. They are using, of course, the deposit to make to manage their own, for example. And in, for example, the rental tenancy, what is important is actually to legalize the contract, which at the moment we do not have. Individual landlord are having our own, their own contract, and the contract can be can be biased. Okay, because it's between, of course, the agreement is between the landlord and also tenant. And then one element that was included in the drafting is the introduction of tribunal. Okay, I think tribunal, because it is a way low cost, cost effective. For example, you are paying like 10 ringgit or 50 ringgit for your case to be able to be heard in the tribunal. I think still in a long process, but the effort by the government is there. To protect not only the house, the landlord, but also the tenant. So I think that needs to be acknowledged. I think that what the government are doing, which is good, need to be acknowledged that it is good. Of course, there are weaknesses or there are issue which can be improved. I think
Okay.
that.
Thank you, Prof. Mariana. Yes, if there must be some legalities surrounding security of rental in order for this renting to be a viable solution. Should so-called affordable housing be approved even when why do they say so-called? Even when the location or market conditions are not right, resulting in a high overhang. I think, Prof. Mariana, you've already explained this in terms of looking at the right places, the right location, and making sure that it's following the distribution of income, people staying there. High overhang, of course, it happens at both, at affordable housing, at high-end housing. So there's really something wrong somewhere there. Next, what models of participatory work best to ensure that communities are not only consulted but genuinely shape the decisions that affect their housing? Yes, Somsook, to you, definitely.
Okay. What I felt for a long time, I think in Malaysia, you don't have a lot of participatory space for the people. With the local government, with the development issue, the system is something like a little afraid if the people are active too much or proposing their demand too much. So you like to keep them obedient and listen to what the government will tell them to do, right? This is in some way a kind of a long culture in some way, compare with Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. In the changing climate, a more political opening, democratic process, if this is one of the first layer that we should get more used to listening to the people. I think this will be very important. The user side, the proposal from the people. I learned yesterday from the professor saying that I asked how the opinion of the people or the demand of the people would be brought to the government. Today you have an intermediary, the consultant, the professor who sort of trying to put together the project. If it's a good one, he will discuss with the people. And then he put together what the people think, what the people want into the project, right? But why not a little more direct system? In creating a more participatory platform, we may have to see how the representative of a community would be little by little, gradually developed. Because people are okay. Malaysia people are really very good, very capable, very soft, very nice. Why not creating a platform or sort of an organization for them to join, to link with the way the system is making up the program, the development activity, and sort of building the new culture of this democratic consultation with the community. I think this is quite important. So if the intermediary, like the professor, consultant, are not working, it means many of the projects to be developed doesn't have an active voice for the people. So I think in managing the city, managing the development activity, it would be good that we bring the people to join us, to be an active actor, to be a responsive development force, and deliver the burden or the responsibility to them. So let them also take care of whatever possible development. The government don't need to hold it too heavily. No? But let the people take care. You stay in the same street, you take care of the street or the tree. You have to find a way to do it. The children link together into a group, this and that, the kind of social organization that would allow the new managerial force for the city to work with the people. If we have that culture a little stronger, then we can use this kind of structure into an active housing planning process.
Thank you, Somsook. I would like for Professor Burgess to comment on this, because this is something that's, I suppose, would happen in evolution or in societies. What would be your take on this, coming from a very developed country?
We don't have a very participatory system. We don't build much collective housing. We don't have many housing cooperatives. If you want to buy a house, you buy it from a house builder, and they tell you what it should look like, and they all look the same. But we have a big second-hand market, so we don't have a hugely participatory system. What we have is a really good system if you want to object to new housing. Right? So if you want to object to new housing, everybody gets a voice. So I don't think we have a very good model for this in a positive way.
Okay, yes, okay. Next, we have the vacancy tax aims to ensure that houses are built for living in, rather than for capital gain. Could you please comment on this? I might want to just expand the question a bit to our panelists. This vacancy tax is not just for unsold properties. What has been in the public sphere now, the debate is, it's not just for unsold properties, but it's also for homes that are being purchased but are left unoccupied. So basically, it's a waste on resources. Maybe we start with Prof. Gemma first.
Sounds like a good idea, because empty houses don't build communities, they don't provide for households. So I think it, I was astonished to hear how much empty new housing you have, because in the UK, the finance model means that private developers would reduce the price of those apartments because they would have to sell them to pay back their loans, because we don't have a sell-to-build model. So we would see a price reduction if we had empty new properties, whereas your model means that you just have empty properties. So it feels like a good idea.
Okay, vacancy tax. Depending, I think for the government, of course, it will create income. I think this would be going to the local authority or even or the state authority, not to the federal government. To individuals, I think to the publics. It will be depending on individual. If you have more than one homes, more than one house, and you left it vacant, then it will cost you. But in terms of the market, maybe it can help to reduce vacant property and also even overhang property. If, for example, it is overhang, then the vacancy tax will be imposed to the developer. If it's individual has been purchased, then it will the vacancy tax will be imposed to the individual. It could basically help to reduce, I think, the vacancy or even the overhang, because developer will be very careful in, for example, building their houses, because if not, they still have to pay the vacancy tax. And for individual, for the public, same thing. And it will be positive for the local authority. But what we want is that all tax paid to the local authority is to be used for development of infrastructure, for example, for reducing issue about flooding. You know, I think as public, we don't want to hear that the local authority announcing they are having this amount of million ringgit of money as revenue, but issue talking about our infrastructure, our flooding, public transport still having a problem. So we want that money to be spent to the public. So that, I think, yeah.
Increase the trust. And certainly, if you have a individual home and you are being put vacancy tax, one of, I suppose, the behavioral economics aspect is that they would then open that place for renting, which is very interesting because that would make more spaces for renting. We have just one more
Another
question.
thing is talking about not only houses but also offices.
Oh, offices is
commercial.
Is another can of worms. Okay, last I was told that we can only do one question, and then after that the panelists will give some closing remarks. So I don't quite, I mean, shift to renters, I think just now Prof. Mariana dah menjawab. Okay, because we bring it back to the topic. Should we reimagine roles in housing so that the community determines? The market funds, not the state, the market funds, and the state delivers. So the state can be the contractors now, and the market is where you get the money. Or, yeah, anybody wants to take that first? Maybe Somsook? The community determines, the market funds that community type of projects, and the state delivers. Thoughts, or is this not going to work?
Well, my personal opinion, I feel the state should not do too much anyway. You know, in general, in every country, we have a system. It overlaps with that rules, with that regulation, with the other ministry, and it has many steps and top down in general. So it tends to be stiff with the rules, with regulations. But state is very important. It's the referee. Referee don't play.
Oh, referee don't play the game. Okay. So this is the one. Referee don't play the game.
Set the system so there are players, and the more player, the better. But fair play, and better quality, this and that. So this is the role of government, not to deliver directly, but how to find a way that we allow the community actor. Because this is the people who need that, need better housing. They have drive, they have eagerness, they have passion, right? Let this actor capable and work to get it as much as possible, create space, create the possibility, so the actor are the mover. Now, in moving that, you move with the university, you move with the private sector, you move with the other. So if we able to allow this space and support to this group, make it visible, make the voice out of them, and they also make their homework. Not just to get it, but you start the saving, you see what the possible, what will be the future, a better community if you're going to build it and so on. Make a lot of homework, see the good project over there, have a holiday trip to the other cities, see what are the other possible projects the other set of people are doing and so on. So get with a lot of proactive, positive, creative idea, and little by little organize it into a development force. I think this is one thing that we should do, and link with the market is very, very interesting, because here in Malaysia, you have a very good example of that. But only how to make a balance between the resident group and the market, because the market, they're very good. We have some good projects in some city where we're able to link with the private sector. They know how to buy land cheaper. They know how to make a construction better and cheaper as well. And they have a lot of creative way in which the private sector are good at to support the community. and they themselves can also get some profit. I think this is a very interesting merger between the demand side and the supply side, direct actor, right? The government set the rule, set the possibility that allow the multiple actor to do this delivery in a different form, different creativity, as much as possible by themselves. Yeah.
Okay, so being the referee, I think the government must have a yellow card, a red card. Anybody not doing it to both community as well as the market. Okay, so we are at the end. No more asking questions. Sorry, 3 minutes for each, or 2 minutes for each, to give us your closing remarks. Where shall I start? From Prof. Mariana or from Gemma?
Okay.
Okay, you want to go
Yeah.
first? Okay.
I think overall on humanizing housing, it is not an old concept, but we as Malaysian, either we are the community, we are the authority, we are developer, need to work together in ensuring that our neighborhood are of a good quality, because as we already mentioned, living in a neighborhood, it takes, I think, our whole lifetime. It's not just for 1 to 2 years. It can take up to 30 years, you know. So a good community, a good infrastructure, a good quality of housing and neighborhood is very important. So I think that humanizing housing will be one of the, I think, later on main agenda for the review of Dasar Perumahan Negara 2026-2030.
So,
I think humanizing the process of housing, it would be a key point, a turn, a very important turn from the last 10 years of a lot of housing development by developer, redevelopment, whatever. If we put this factor into a serious consideration and adjust what have been good. I mean, there are good elements, there are lessons learned, there are lots of problems, this and that, you know, put together into a redesigning the housing process in which human-centric, people-centric, and a good social development process by the people could be a step forward in which we could take the advantage, the lesson, and the joint development possibility between the people and the active actor, the private sector, and the city to be a joint development partner in the longer term. That would be very striking, and Malaysia would lead Asia. Because today you don't have slum, like many other countries. You passed that stage in the 80s, where you change well, I have visited several longhouses before, where people complain that it's a good policy, but we stay in the longhouse for 10 years. But finally, they're able to move into the different housing project, which is, in some way, is one good possible model which other countries cannot achieve as what Malaysia have been doing. Even this redevelopment is quite interesting, the way you make a cross-subsidy, where the finance is coming from the active private sector, right? Only the way in which the design has been done need to be adjusted, need to be changed more for the people and allow the people more voice into the process. We need to find a way how we make it better, but you already have a lot of good experience and would be a leading country in Asia, yeah, for private sector, for community, and for the local authority, the state, and the government. Thank you.
Gemma, please.
I suppose what we've talked about today is that, you know, housing policy is not just a technical issue or a financial question. It's about how we choose to live. It's about social values, how we want to build a society for the future. And you're at a point where you're really thinking about that. I think lessons from the UK, that housing works best when markets and governments act in partnership. One can't succeed without the other. That housing embodies our social values, and if we treat it just as an economic good, then we just build houses, but we don't build communities. And I think, Somsook, you've really shown that today. Context matters. You can borrow international practice, but it doesn't mean it's the right thing. I think that principles travel, but institutions rarely do. Scales of governance are clearly important. You need national frameworks that set standards, that set fairness, but you need local innovation to be responsive. And I think housing policy development is not just about delivering units. It's about a vision for the kind of housing system that you want for future generations. So I think it's about, housing is not just about buildings, it's about the kind of society that you want to build.
Thank you. With that, can we just give a round of applause for the fantastic discussion we've had today? Thank you very much for your attention. Iba, over to you.
Thank you, Doc. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for not being able to address every question today. Rest assured, we truly value your feedback in furthering the discussion. If you have any more queries or any unanswered questions, you may email us at krievents@kriinstitute.org and we will respond to them. We will now like to invite Dr. Suraya to present a small token of appreciation to our distinguished panelists. Give a round of applause to Professor Dr. Mariana Mohamed Osman. Next, we move on to Ms. Somsook Boonyabancha. And last but not least, Professor Dr. Gemma Burgess. May I now invite all our speakers to remain on stage for a quick photo session? Okay. Thank you to all our panelists for today's discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we have come to the end of the KRI Housing Forum 2025. Once again, our heartfelt thanks to all our distinguished panelists for their insightful analysis, and to each of you, both here in person and those with us virtually, for your presence and engaged participation today. On behalf of the organizers, we sincerely apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced during the event. We hope you found the discussions fruitful and the exchanges meaningful. For those joining us in the hall, lunch is now served at the Zest restaurant in the same level as the venue. Please enjoy your lunch. You may look for area A, B and Zest too. I'm Tiba Lakshmi Kunasekaran, and it has been a pleasure taking you through today's event. On behalf of KRI, thank you again for being part of this important conversation. Do not forget to follow KRI on all our social media platforms for updates on upcoming publications and events. We look forward to seeing you at our future events. Have a pleasant afternoon ahead. Thank you, everyone.